Hi guys, and welcome to my channel. So today we are going to be talking about the case of the Beaumont children. This is a very interesting case. It's actually been 54 years and it still hasn't been solved to this day. So yeah, super interesting. So let's just dive straight into it. I do just want to point out that I am in no way a professional. I do not work in any areas of crime investigation or law. I just simply like to review and learn about different cases from all over the world. So all this information is from online sources that are available to you guys and the public. No disrespect is meant to anyone that I may mention in this video or any of my other videos. So the Beaumont family consisted of 3 children: Jane, who was the oldest at 9 years old, Anna, the middle child, who was 7 years old, and little Grant, who was the youngest at 4 years old. They were the children to Jim and Nancy Beaumont, and they all lived in a house on Harding Street in Somerton Park, Adelaide, which was about a 5-minute bus ride to Glenelg Beach. So this is where the events leading up to the Beaumont children's disappearance began. It was Australia Day 1966, so the 26th of January. It was a warm summer's day and the children wanted to go down to Glenelg Beach to cool off and just have a bit of fun before the school terms started back up for them, which was the following week. The children wanted to catch the 10 a.m. bus down to Glenelg Beach, and they'd actually done this same bus route the day before on the 25th. So Nancy, their mother, just had no worries about them catching the bus down to the beach themselves because she knew that they had done it the day before with no problems. Australia in the 60s was not as it is today. It was considered very normal to let your children go and venture off and play even at the ages of 9, 7 and 4. In the summer especially, Australia was known to have children playing till all hours in backyards, on the street, in beaches, so it was just considered a very safe place. Jane, who was the eldest, was considered very responsible and often looked after her siblings, so she was trusted to get all of them to the beach and back safely. So Jim, their father, was at work and Nancy was at home with the children, and she gave them the A-OK to head off to the beach. So the children quickly got into their bathers. Jane was wearing a pink onesuit with pale green shorts and canvas shoes. Anna wore a red and white striped one piece with tan shorts and tan shoes. Grant wore green and white bathers, green cotton shorts and red leather sandals. Jane packed 3 beach towels into a bag as well as a book and money that her mother Nancy had given her. She'd given her 8 shillings and 6 pence to use to pay for the bus fare there and back from the beach, and to also get some food if they got hungry while they were at the beach. The children jumped on the 10 a.m. bus and were told to catch the 2 p.m. bus back in the afternoon, and this wouldn't have been a problem for them because they had done this exact same route the day before, as I said. So when 2 p.m. rolled around, Nancy actually went to meet the children at the bus stop where they would have gotten off, and the bus pulled up and the children actually didn't get off, and Nancy was not at all worried about this. She just assumed that they may have just slightly lost track of time and missed this first bus and expected them to be on the next bus. She continued to wait at the bus stop and the next bus came and the children yet again didn't get off, and Nancy was getting a little bit worried at this point because she knew how responsible her children were, and again she knew that they knew how to get home on the bus as they'd done it at the exact same time the previous day, so she was getting a little bit concerned. Nancy decided to call her husband Jim and just let him know of the situation, so he actually left work and went for a drive down to the beach where the children should have been to see if maybe they had again lost track of time and were just playing at the beach, or maybe they were walking home, but he had no luck. So he drove back to the family house, picked up his wife Nancy, and then they both went down to just have a second look down at the beach or around the roads that they would have been, but no luck came of this and they couldn't find their children anywhere. Jim said that he would not sleep until he found his children safe and brought them home. But unfortunately by 7:30 p.m. he actually had to call the police so they could assist him, but no luck came of this. And the next morning, the Beaumont children were all declared as missing persons. Jim continued to search everywhere for his children, and Nancy was just absolutely beside herself. She was distraught that her children hadn't come home from the beach the previous day, and they actually had to sedate her just so she would calm down about the situation. It took them many, many days to even speak to the press about what had happened in regards to the disappearance of their children, which obviously I don't blame them. They would have been absolutely distraught and heartbroken and just worried for their children's safety at that point, but they were absolutely beside themselves. The police convinced Jim and Nancy that everything would be okay because a disappearance involving 3 children was pretty unheard of. There was a theory that the children were just hiding from their parents because they had not returned home at the time that they were supposed to, but as the search continued, they realized that this theory was just, it couldn't be validated. The police scoured all the areas that the children should have been at or visited that day, and they also couldn't find any of the children's belongings that they had taken on the day that they disappeared. There was another theory that the children had drowned whilst swimming at Glenelg Beach, but it was unlikely that all 3 of them had drowned. And even if that was the case, the police expected to find the children's belongings still sat on the beach where they had left them. So because they couldn't find their belongings, they just ruled this theory out. The search for Jane, Anna and Grant soon became the biggest missing persons search in South Australian history. And within the first 48 hours of police asking the public for leads, they actually got in hundreds and hundreds of leads saying that people had seen the Beaumont children on the day of their disappearance. The amount of leads that added up or were just ruled out allowed police to establish a timeline of the children's journey that day, or what they are pretty sure the children's journey was that day. The driver of the 10:15 a.m. bus confirmed that all 3 of the Beaumont children boarded the bus the morning of their disappearance. They then exited the bus at the correct stop, and a local postman actually saw the Beaumont children walking down towards the direction of Glenelg Beach. They were said to have been holding hands and giggling and laughing, and just they didn't seem to be in any danger. They seemed to be going to the beach. Several witnesses came forward saying that they had definitely seen the Beaumont children playing in the shallow waters of Glenelg Beach at the busiest part of the beach, which is actually where they were the day before as well. After 11 a.m, the children were seen at Collie Reserve, just playing on the grass and under the sprinklers, just washing their feet from the sand and just laying in the sun playing. At this time, an elderly woman witnessed a man approach the children at Collie Reserve. This man was described as being tanned with an athletic build, very tall with long wavy hair, and approximately maybe in his 30s, and he was said to be wearing blue navy bather briefs. After this man spoke with the children, he was seen to have laid a towel down just a couple of feet away from them, and he laid down and just continued to watch the children play. About 15 minutes after this man had had the interaction with the children were actually seen to be laughing and playing with him and jumping all over him. But this witness actually left about half an hour later. So she left Collie Reserve, and the last she saw of them, that they just seemed to all be playing together. At some point between 11:30 a.m. and midday, the Beaumont children went to Wenzel's cake shop to buy pasties for lunch, and this shop was actually located right next to the bus stop that they were going to use to get home that day. The shopkeeper recalled the children ordering 5 pasties, 6 finger buns, and 2 large bottles of soft drink, and one of the children actually stated, quote, "and a pie for the man." This was an unusual request because the shopkeeper said that the Beaumont children were just standing with themselves. It was just the three of them in the shop and the shopkeeper. There was no man in sight with them. This order was also suspicious because it exceeded the amount that Nancy had given the children to spend on food that day. So when it was time to pay, the shopkeeper actually recalled the children handing over a £1 note, which was a significant amount for a child to be carrying around with them in 1966. And second, their mother Nancy had only given them 8 shillings and 6 pence for food that day. She did not give them any notes whatsoever. So this was very suspicious because they must have received this note from somewhere else or obtained it elsewhere. After they left the bakery, they did not go back to the bus stop to head home. They actually went back to Collie Reserve, where a woman witnessed the Beaumont children return back to the tall blonde man. The unidentified man actually came up to the witness and asked them if they'd seen anyone going through their bags. And he also stated, quote, "Someone's nicked our money." This conversation was actually overheard by another witness, a woman who was walking past. And then she proceeded to see the tall blonde man actually helping Jane and Anna put their shorts over their bathers. And she said that she took notice to this because she thought that the eldest looking child looked far too old to be needing assistance getting dressed. The tall blonde man was then seen going to the changing rooms to get changed while the Beaumont children were sitting outside on a bench waiting for him patiently. They were still sat there waiting for this tall blonde man at Collie Reserve when the elderly couple left at 12:15 p.m. After this, there is no further confirmed sightings of the Beaumont children or this tall, blonde, unidentified man. The police were then informed that the Beaumont children, and especially Jane, were actually very shy, so it was very unusual for them to be playing or associating with a stranger. So the police then theorized that this unidentified man may possibly be a child predator and had been grooming them for maybe days or weeks prior to this incident. Child predators are obviously very good at manipulating and gaining children's trust, so they definitely thought that maybe the Beaumont children had been in association with this male from previous visits at the beach. What also potentially links to this theory is that Anna had actually expressed to their mother Nancy that Jane had a boyfriend at the beach. So Nancy didn't think anything of this. She just thought that Jane had made a friend at the beach, as kids do. But then when witnesses started coming forward saying they'd seen a tall blonde man with the Beaumont children, Nancy suddenly thought that maybe this was the boyfriend that Anna had been talking about, Jane's boyfriend at the beach. A few months after the Beaumont children's disappearance, a woman actually came forward to police saying that she had seen 3 young children and a tall man going into the house, the children looking like the ages of the Beaumont children. She actually saw the young boy come back out of the house alone and begin to walk down the street, and the tall blonde man was said to have come running out after him and grabbed him pretty rough and brought him back into the house. That was the last she had ever seen of the 3 young children and the tall man, and the house the next day just seemed to be abandoned and deserted. Sightings continued on and off for months to years later, but none of these were ever confirmed or led to finding the Beaumont children. The case went on and obviously was absolutely huge here in Australia, but it did catch international attention, and the police and Jim and Nancy Beaumont decided to actually fly in a psychic by the name of Gerard Croisset, and he was said to have solved other missing persons cases or give leads as to where these missing people were. Unfortunately, nothing came from this psychic. He was said to have changed his story all the time, but he claimed that he thought the Beaumont children were buried under a big warehouse. And he also thought that something bad had happened to the children, but Jim and Nancy Beaumont were adamant that their children were still alive. Detectives went to this warehouse that Gerard claimed the children were buried under, and it was eventually in time excavated, fully excavated, but no remains, and the children, nothing was ever found. And the police actually said that there was about 17 items between the children that they had been carrying the day they disappeared, but none of these items were ever found. So 2 years later, Jim and Nancy Beaumont actually received about 3 to 4 letters. Some sources say 3 and some sources say 4, so I'm just going to say between 3 and 4 letters, which were supposedly written by Jane and the person that was holding them captive. In the first letter, the author, who was claiming to be the children's captor, said that he would actually return the Beaumont children to Jim and Nancy if they met him or her at a specific place at a specific time. Jim and Nancy went to meet this person at the designated place at the designated time, and they also brought along an undercover detective, but they were met by no one. They then received a second letter claiming that they knew that Jim and Nancy had brought an undercover detective, and so they were going to keep the Beaumont children forever. About 25 years later, fingerprint DNA came back, proving that these letters were a hoax. They actually were linked to the DNA of a teenage boy at the time. So because it was 25 years later, this boy was obviously a lot older, so police decided not to arrest him. So still to this day, the Beaumont children have never been found, and it has been thought that this abduction or crime was very planned out, since no remains of the children and none of their items have ever been found still to this day. One of the last leads that police got in regards to the Beaumont children was that someone was claiming to know who the killer was. They were adamant that they knew who the killer was. But the only problem with this lead was that the person they were claiming that had done this to the Beaumont children was actually already deceased. So it is obviously hard to investigate this as this person was deceased. So to my knowledge, nothing has ever come of this lead, and I'm not sure if it's still an ongoing investigation or not. One other more recent lead was an investigation into a bar owner, Tony Monroe. He was a registered sex offender, but again, to my knowledge, nothing seems to have come from this, and I'm not sure if it's still an ongoing investigation or if this lead was ruled out. Ultimately, investigators have no idea what happened to the Beaumont children. They don't even know if it was a sex trafficking crime, a sex crime, an abduction, a murder. They don't even know if the children are still alive. If they were alive, they would be much older now. They would be in their 50s or 60s. Nancy Beaumont unfortunately passed away just in 2019 at age 92, which is absolutely heartbreaking to know that she never will find out what happened to her 3 children. The last I heard, Jim Beaumont is still alive, but after their children vanished, there was just a lot of strain on Jim and Nancy's relationship, and they did actually end up separating, but Jim is still alive to my knowledge. And this actually brings us to the end of this case. So I hope you guys found it interesting. I certainly found it interesting. It's been 50 plus years and it's still unsolved. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. Bye.